The girl with tangled auburn hair pressed herself against the rough wooden wall behind Murphy's restaurant, her stomach growling so loudly she feared someone might hear it over the clatter of dishes and laughter coming from inside. Arizona Jenkins had been on the streets of Malad City, Idaho, for 3 weeks now, ever since the stagecoach she had been traveling on was robbed and left her stranded without a penny to her name. The summer of 1882 was proving to be one of the harshest of her 21 years, and as the smell of roasted beef wafted through the back door, she felt tears prick at her eyes. She had never imagined her life would come to this, begging for scraps like a stray dog, but pride did not fill an empty belly. The back door swung open, and a portly man in a stained apron tossed a bucket of vegetable peelings into the dirt. Arizona stepped forward timidly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, please, if you have anything to spare, I have not eaten in 2 days." The cook looked her up and down with a mixture of pity and disgust before shaking his head. "Get on out of here. Mr. Murphy does not want your kind loitering around his establishment. Bad for business." Arizona's shoulders sagged, but she did not move. She could not. Her legs felt weak and her vision swam slightly. The cook disappeared back inside, slamming the door behind him. She sank down onto the dusty ground, pulling her knees to her chest. Her dress, once a pretty blue cotton, was now torn and filthy. She had sold her only good shoes days ago for a meal that had barely sustained her. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Arizona closed her eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to be full, to be clean, to be safe. She had been traveling from Missouri to California to meet her aunt, the only family she had left after her parents died of fever the previous winter. But fate had other plans, and now she was alone in a strange town where no one knew her name and fewer still cared. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, someone was crouching beside her. Arizona jerked awake, her heart pounding with fear. In the fading light, she could make out a man in his mid-20s wearing a dark hat and a worn leather vest. His face was shadowed, but she could see concern in his eyes. "Miss, are you all right?" His voice was deep and gentle, with a slight drawl that marked him as someone who had spent considerable time working cattle. Arizona tried to stand but swayed dangerously. Strong hands caught her before she could fall. "Easy now," the man said. "When was the last time you ate something proper?" "I do not remember," she admitted, her voice cracking. 2 days, maybe 3. The man muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse. "My name is Henry Crawford. I own the ranch about 5 miles west of town. What is your name, Miss Arizona Jenkins?" She looked up at him properly now. He had a strong jaw, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes that were a warm brown. There was kindness in his face, but also a hardness that came from years of difficult work. "Well, Miss Jenkins, I cannot in good conscience leave you here like this. Come on." He helped her to her feet, keeping a steadying hand on her elbow. "Where are we going?" Arizona asked, confused and wary despite her desperate circumstances. "Inside. You need food and I need dinner." Seems like a simple solution to both problems. Arizona pulled back slightly. "I cannot. The cook said I was not welcome here." Henry's expression darkened. "That cook does not own this place, and last I checked, my money spends just as well as anyone else's. Besides, I happen to know the owner pretty well. Come on." He guided her around to the front entrance of Murphy's restaurant. Arizona wanted to protest further, but she was too weak and too hungry to put up much of a fight. The warmth that hit her when they stepped inside was almost overwhelming after spending so many nights sleeping rough. The restaurant was busy with the dinner crowd, and several heads turned to look at them as they entered. Henry ignored the stares and led Arizona to a table near the back. He pulled out a chair for her, and she sank into it gratefully. A waiter approached, his eyebrows rising when he recognized her as the girl who had been begging out back. "Mr. Crawford, I am not sure. We will have 2 of the special, and make sure the portions are generous. Also bring some bread right away and coffee." Henry's tone brooked no argument. The waiter hesitated for only a moment before nodding and hurrying away. Arizona felt every eye in the restaurant on her, and shame burned hot in her chest. She looked down at her hands, which were dirty and calloused from trying to find any work she could over the past weeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know why you are helping me, but thank you." Henry leaned back in his chair, studying her thoughtfully. "My mama raised me to believe that when you see someone in need and you have the means to help, you do it. No questions asked, no judgment rendered. Besides, you look like you have been through hell, and something tells me it was not all your own doing." The waiter returned with a basket of fresh bread and 2 cups of steaming coffee. Arizona had to force herself not to grab the bread like a wild animal. Instead, she took a piece with trembling hands and bit into it slowly. The taste was so good she almost cried. Henry watched her eat, his expression unreadable. "How did you end up in Malad City?" he asked after a moment. Between bites of bread, Arizona told him her story. She explained about her parents' deaths, about the aunt in California she had never met but who had agreed to take her in, about the stagecoach robbery that had left her stranded. She told him about trying to find work, about how people looked at a young woman alone with suspicion and disdain, about how quickly her small reserve of emergency money had run out. "I tried everything," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I offered to clean, to cook, to wash clothes. But no one would hire me. They said a woman alone could not be trusted, that I must be running from something or someone. One woman actually accused me of being a fallen woman just because I did not have a husband or family traveling with me." Henry's jaw tightened. "This town can be harsh, especially to strangers. Folks are set in their ways and suspicious of anyone new." He paused as the waiter brought their meals, setting down plates piled high with roast beef, potatoes, and vegetables. Arizona stared at the food, overwhelmed. "I cannot possibly pay you back for this. I am not asking you to." Henry picked up his fork and knife. "Eat, Miss Jenkins. We can talk about everything else after you have gotten some food in you." She did not need to be told twice. Arizona ate slowly at first, mindful of how her stomach might react after being empty for so long. But as her hunger began to ease, she found herself relaxing slightly. Henry ate in companionable silence, occasionally glancing around the restaurant or out the window at the darkening street. When they were finished, Henry paid the bill and stood. "Come on. I have a room at the boarding house down the street. You can clean up there and we will figure out what to do next." Arizona followed him outside, her mind racing. She knew she should be cautious about trusting a strange man, but something about Henry Crawford felt genuine. Besides, what choice did she have? She had been sleeping in alleys and abandoned buildings, always afraid, always cold or too hot, always hungry. At least this man had shown her kindness when no one else would. The boarding house was a 2-story wooden structure with a wide porch. Henry led her up the stairs to a room on the 2nd floor. It was simple but clean, with a bed, a washstand, and a small table with 2 chairs. He lit the lamp, casting warm light across the space. "The washroom is down the hall," he said. "There should be hot water this time of evening. I will wait out on the porch while you clean up. There is a shirt and some other things in that trunk that might fit you better than what you are wearing." Arizona looked down at her ruined dress. "I cannot take your clothes. They are not mine. They belong to my sister. She left them here the last time she visited. Henry's expression softened. She would want someone to get use out of them. She is married now, living in Oregon with her husband and their 2 little ones. Does not make it back this way much anymore. Are you sure? Positive. Now go on and clean up. Take your time. I will be right outside if you need anything. Henry stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. Arizona stood in the middle of the room for a long moment, trying to process everything that had happened in the past hour. Then she opened the trunk and found a simple brown skirt and white blouse, along with some undergarments that looked barely worn. She gathered them up along with a towel and made her way down the hall to the washroom. The hot water felt like heaven against her skin. Arizona scrubbed away weeks of dirt and grime, watching the water turn gray in the basin. She washed her hair twice, working out the tangles as gently as she could. When she was finally clean, she dried off and put on the borrowed clothes. They fit reasonably well, though the skirt was a bit long. She rolled up the hem and secured it with a pin she found in the pocket. When she returned to the room, she found Henry sitting in one of the chairs by the table. He stood when she entered, and she saw surprise flicker across his face. "You look much better," he said. "Healthier." Arizona touched her damp hair self-consciously. "I feel human again. Thank you, Mr. Crawford. You have been more kind to me than anyone has in a very long time. Call me Henry, and you are welcome." He gestured to the other chair. "Sit down. We need to talk about what happens next." Arizona sat, folding her hands in her lap. Henry pulled his chair around so he was facing her directly. In the lamplight, she could see his face more clearly now. He had a small scar above his left eyebrow and lines around his eyes from squinting in the sun. He looked like a man who worked hard and did not shy away from challenges. "I have been thinking," Henry began. "You need work, and I need help at my ranch. My housekeeper quit last month to move back east with her daughter, and I have been managing on my own, but it is getting to be too much. The place is a mess. I am eating burned food half the time, and I barely have time to keep up with the ranch work and the house work both." Arizona's heart began to beat faster. "Are you offering me a position?" "I am. Room and board plus a fair wage. You would be responsible for cooking, cleaning, laundry, and general household management. It is hard work, and the ranch is a bit isolated, but it is honest work and you would be safe." "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Arizona asked, searching his face. "You know nothing about me except what I have told you. I could be lying about everything." Henry smiled slightly. "I am a pretty good judge of character, and my gut tells me you are exactly who you say you are, a woman down on her luck who needs a break. Besides, I saw you outside that restaurant. You were not putting on an act. That kind of desperation cannot be faked." Arizona felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I do not know what to say. Yes, of course, yes. I will work hard, I promise. You will not regret this. I believe you." Henry stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. "We will head out to the ranch tomorrow morning. I need to finish some business in town first, but we can leave by mid-morning. You can stay here tonight. I will sleep in the barn where I board my horse." "I cannot take your room," Arizona protested. "It is already decided. Besides, after what you have been through, you deserve a proper bed for a night." He picked up his hat from where it sat on the table. "Lock the door after I leave and do not open it for anyone but me. I will knock 3 times in the morning when I am ready to go." Arizona stood and walked over to him. On impulse, she reached out and touched his arm. "Thank you, Henry. You have saved my life tonight." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then back up at her face. For a moment, something passed between them, a spark of connection that made Arizona's breath catch. Then Henry stepped back, clearing his throat. "Get some rest, Miss Jenkins. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." After he left, Arizona locked the door and leaned against it, her mind whirling. She moved to the bed and sat down, running her hand over the clean quilt. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. She lay down, intending to just rest her eyes for a moment, but exhaustion claimed her immediately and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. True to his word, Henry knocked 3 times the next morning. Arizona woke feeling more rested than she had in ages. She quickly made the bed and tidied the room before opening the door. Henry stood there with a canvas bag in one hand. "I brought you some supplies for the journey," he said, handing her the bag. "There is a canteen of water, some jerky, and some biscuits. The ride to the ranch is about 2 hours." They made their way to the livery stable where Henry kept his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper. He also rented a gentle mare for Arizona to ride. She had not been on a horse since she was a child, but she managed to mount with only a little help. The ride out of town was quiet. Arizona was taking in the landscape, the way the morning sun painted everything gold, the distant mountains that ringed the valley. Idaho was beautiful in a stark, wild way that was very different from the gentle hills of Missouri she had grown up with. As they rode, Henry pointed out various landmarks and told her about the area. He had bought his ranch 3 years ago, he explained, after working as a ranch hand for nearly a decade. He ran cattle, mostly, along with some horses and a few chickens for eggs. "It is not a huge operation," he said as they followed a dirt road that wound through sagebrush-covered hills. "But it is mine, and I am building it up slowly. Eventually I want to expand, maybe bring in some sheep as well, but that is down the road." "You must be very proud," Arizona said. "To own your own land, to be your own boss, that is quite an accomplishment," Henry nodded. "It was not easy. I saved every penny I could for years. Lived rough, worked every job I could find, but it was worth it. There is nothing like knowing that the land beneath your feet belongs to you." They crested a small rise and Henry pointed ahead. "There it is, the Crawford Ranch." Arizona looked down into a small valley where a cluster of buildings sat beside a winding creek. The main house was a modest single-story structure made of logs with a stone chimney. There was a barn, a chicken coop, a few outbuildings, and a corral with several horses grazing inside it. It was humble but well-maintained, and Arizona felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. "It is wonderful," she said sincerely. They rode down into the valley, and Henry helped her dismount in front of the house. Her legs were shaky from the long ride, and she had to hold onto the horse for a moment to steady herself. Henry led both horses to the barn while Arizona waited by the front door. When he returned, he led her inside. The house was exactly as she would have expected from a man living alone. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace taking up most of one wall. There was a rough-hewn table with mismatched chairs, a few shelves lined with supplies, and a rocking chair near the fireplace. 2 doors led off the main room, presumably to bedrooms. Everything was functional but untidy. Dishes were piled in a wash basin, dust covered most surfaces, and the floor needed a good sweeping. But Arizona did not mind. She could work with this. She could make this place a proper home. "I know it is not much," Henry said, sounding almost apologetic. "Like I said, I have been managing on my own and not doing a great job of it." "It has good bones," Arizona said, walking around the room. "It just needs some attention. I can have this place looking proper in no time." Henry showed her the rest of the house. One bedroom was clearly his, with a large bed and personal belongings scattered about. The other was smaller but still adequate, with a single bed and a small dresser. "This will be your room," he said. "I will bring in some more furniture if you need it." There is a trunk in the barn with some more of my sister's things. I will fetch it for you." Over the next few hours, Henry showed Arizona around the ranch. He introduced her to the horses, showed her where he kept the feed and supplies, and explained his daily routine. Arizona paid careful attention, asking questions and taking mental notes. She was determined to prove herself, to show Henry that his faith in her was not misplaced. That evening, Arizona cooked her first meal in her new home. She made biscuits from scratch, fried up some bacon, and cooked eggs from the chicken coop. It was simple fare, but it was hot and fresh, and when Henry took his first bite, he closed his eyes with a look of pure contentment. "This is the best meal I have had in months," he said. "Maybe longer." Arizona felt a warm glow of pride. "It is just biscuits and bacon." "Maybe, but they are perfect biscuits and bacon." Henry smiled at her across the table. "I think this is going to work out just fine, Miss Jenkins." "Call me Arizona," she said. "If we are going to be working together, we might as well use our given names. Arizona it is." Over the following weeks, Arizona settled into life at the ranch. She woke early each morning to start breakfast, then spent her days cleaning, cooking, doing laundry, and tending to the garden she had discovered behind the house. It was hard work, but it was honest work, and she was good at it. More importantly, she was safe and well fed, and that made all the difference. Henry was an ideal employer. He treated her with respect, paid her fairly, and never made her feel uncomfortable. He spent most of his days working with the cattle or mending fences, coming in only for meals and at the end of the day. They fell into an easy routine, comfortable with each other in a way that surprised them both. But as summer turned to fall, Arizona began to realize that her feelings for Henry were becoming more complicated. She found herself watching for him to come in from the fields, listening for his footsteps on the porch. She took extra care with his meals, wanting to please him. And when he smiled at her or complimented her work, she felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with pride. She tried to push these feelings aside. Henry was her employer, nothing more. He had been kind to her when no one else would, had given her a job and a home. She could not risk ruining that by developing romantic notions. But it was getting harder to ignore what she felt, especially on the cool autumn evening when everything changed. Arizona was outside taking down laundry from the line when she heard shouting from the direction of the barn. She dropped the sheet she was holding and ran toward the sound, her heart pounding. When she rounded the corner of the barn, she saw Henry struggling with a horse, a young stallion that was rearing and kicking. "Get back!" Henry shouted when he saw her, but it was too late. The horse's hooves came down and one of them caught Henry's shoulder, sending him sprawling to the ground. The horse bolted past Arizona, disappearing into the growing darkness. Arizona rushed to Henry's side. He was conscious but clearly in pain, clutching his left shoulder. "Are you all right?" "Can you stand?" "I think so," he grunted, but when he tried to get up, he cried out and fell back. "Something is wrong with my shoulder. I heard something pop." "Do not move. Let me help you." Arizona slipped her arm around his waist and carefully helped him to his feet. He leaned heavily on her as they made their way slowly back to the house. By the time they got inside, sweat was beading on Henry's forehead from the pain. Arizona helped him sit in the rocking chair by the fireplace. "I need to check your shoulder. Can you remove your shirt?" Henry nodded, his face pale. With Arizona's help, he managed to get his shirt off. His left shoulder was already swelling and bruising, and when Arizona gently probed it with her fingers, Henry hissed in pain. "I think it might be dislocated," she said, remembering a time when her father had suffered a similar injury. "I can try to set it, but it is going to hurt." "Do what you need to do," Henry said through gritted teeth. Arizona positioned herself carefully, said a quick prayer, and then pulled and twisted Henry's arm in the way she remembered her mother doing for her father. Henry cried out, but then there was a distinct popping sound and he sagged in the chair, breathing hard. "Is that better?" Arizona asked anxiously. Henry rotated his shoulder carefully, wincing but looking relieved. "Much better. Still hurts like hell, but it does not feel like it is out of place anymore. Where did you learn to do that?" "My father had the same injury once when I was young. I watched my mother set it." Arizona fetched some clean cloths and wrapped Henry's shoulder to keep it stable. "You need to rest this for at least a few days. No heavy work." Henry laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I cannot afford to rest for a few days. The cattle need tending, the fences need mending, and I still have not found that damned horse that kicked me." "Then I will help you," Arizona said firmly. "I can handle some of the lighter work around the ranch. You have been teaching me anyway." "Arizona, you already have enough to do with the house. The housework can wait. You cannot run this ranch with one arm. Let me help you." Henry looked at her for a long moment, and in his eyes Arizona saw something shift. It was as if he was truly seeing her for the first time, not just as his housekeeper, but as a capable woman who wanted to stand beside him. "All right," he said finally. "We will be partners then, at least until my shoulder heals. But you have to promise me you will be careful. Ranch work can be dangerous. I promise." Over the next several weeks, Arizona learned more about running a ranch than she had ever imagined knowing. Henry taught her to ride better, showed her how to check the cattle for illness or injury, explained how to mend fences and care for the horses. She had a natural aptitude for the work, and Henry found himself relying on her more and more. As they worked side by side, their relationship deepened. They talked about everything and nothing as they rode out to check on the herd. They shared stories from their pasts, dreams for the future, fears and hopes, and everything in between. Arizona learned that Henry had grown up poor, the youngest of 5 children, and had struck out on his own at 16 to make his fortune. He learned that Arizona had always been something of a dreamer, never quite fitting in with the other girls in her town, who only wanted to get married and have babies. "Not that there is anything wrong with marriage and family," she said one afternoon as they sat by the creek eating their lunch. "But I always wanted more than that. I wanted adventure, to see new places, to do things that mattered." "And instead you ended up keeping house for a rancher in Idaho," Henry said with a wry smile. "Some adventure." "You would be surprised," Arizona said, looking out at the golden landscape. "6 months ago, I never would have imagined I could do half the things I have done since coming here. I have learned to rope cattle, mend fences, birth a calf. I have gotten stronger, more confident. This place has changed me, Henry. You have changed me." Henry looked at her, his expression serious. "You have changed me too, Arizona. Before you came, I was just going through the motions. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. But now I find myself looking forward to each day, looking forward to seeing you, talking with you, working beside you." Arizona's heart began to race. "Henry, I know this is probably not the right time or place," he continued, "and I know you might not feel the same way, but I need to tell you. Somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, Arizona Jenkins. You are the strongest, kindest, most capable woman I have ever known, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore." Arizona felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too. I have for weeks now, maybe longer, but I was afraid to say anything. You are my employer, and I did not want to presume. To hell with employer and employee," Henry said, reaching out to cup her face in his hand. "I want you to be my partner in every sense of the word. I want to build this ranch with you, build a life with you. Marry me, Arizona. Say you will marry me." "Yes," Arizona breathed. "Yes, of course yes." Henry leaned in and kissed her, and Arizona felt like her heart might burst with happiness. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "We should probably head back to the house," Henry said, standing and offering her his hand. "We have a lot to plan." They rode back to the ranch holding hands, neither of them able to stop smiling. That evening they sat by the fire and talked about their future. They decided to get married as soon as possible, with just a simple ceremony in town. There was no need for a big fuss, they agreed. What mattered was that they would be together. The wedding took place 2 weeks later at the small church in Malad City. Henry's sister and her family made the long journey from Oregon to be there, and a few of Henry's friends from town attended as well. Arizona wore a simple white dress that Henry's sister had helped her make, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Henry had picked that morning. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Henry kissed Arizona with such tenderness that she felt tears running down her cheeks. They were tears of joy, of relief, of gratitude for everything that had brought her to this moment. After the ceremony, they had a small celebration at Murphy's restaurant, the same place where Henry had first taken Arizona for a meal. The owner, Mr. Murphy himself, came out to congratulate them and apologized for how his cook had treated Arizona that night months ago. "I fired him not long after," Murphy said. "No one deserves to be treated that way, especially not a woman in need. I am glad to see you have landed on your feet, Mrs. Crawford." Mrs. Crawford. Arizona loved the sound of that. They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Henry carried Arizona over the threshold of their home, both of them laughing. That night they lay together in Henry's bed, which was now their bed, and talked until the early hours of the morning. "I still cannot believe this is real sometimes," Arizona said, curled against Henry's chest. 6 months ago, I was begging for scraps behind a restaurant. Now I am married to the most wonderful man I have ever known, and I have a home and a purpose. It feels like a dream." "If it is a dream, I never want to wake up," Henry said, kissing the top of her head. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Arizona Crawford." Life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Arizona continued to manage the household, but now she also worked alongside Henry with the cattle and horses. They were true partners in every sense, making decisions together about the ranch and their future. Henry began teaching Arizona how to handle the business side of things as well, showing her the account books and explaining how he negotiated with buyers. "If anything ever happens to me," he said one evening as they sat at the kitchen table going over the ledgers, "I want you to be able to keep this place running. I want you to be prepared." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Arizona said, but she paid attention anyway. She had learned the hard way that life could change in an instant, and it was better to be prepared. As autumn turned to winter, the ranch work became more challenging. They had to bring the cattle closer to the ranch buildings where they could keep an eye on them during storms. They stocked up on supplies in town, knowing that the roads could become impassable with snow. Henry built a larger woodshed and filled it to capacity, and Arizona spent hours preserving vegetables from her garden and smoking meat for the long winter ahead. Their first Christmas together was simple but perfect. They exchanged modest gifts, with Henry giving Arizona a beautiful leather-bound journal and Arizona giving Henry a new hat she had saved up to buy on their last trip to town. They roasted a chicken for dinner and sang carols by the fire, holding hands and feeling utterly content. In early spring, Arizona realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be sure before saying anything to Henry. When she finally told him, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down with an apologetic look. Sorry, I should not have done that. Are you all right? Is the baby all right?" Arizona laughed, her heart full. "We are fine, Henry, both of us. We are going to have a baby," he said, his eyes shining. "A baby, Arizona, our baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Arizona suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and as summer arrived, the heat made her miserable. But Henry was attentive and caring, taking over more of the household chores and refusing to let her do any heavy work. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," she protested, but secretly she was grateful for his concern. In late September, as the leaves were beginning to turn gold, Arizona went into labor. Henry rode to town to fetch the midwife, an experienced woman named Mrs. Ellen Carter, who had delivered half the babies in Malad City. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Henry paced outside the bedroom door, terrified and helpless. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, he heard the sound he had been waiting for, the cry of a newborn baby. Mrs. Carter opened the door, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Mr. Crawford, a big, healthy boy, and your wife did wonderfully." Henry rushed into the room to find Arizona propped up against pillows, looking exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. Henry approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. Arizona smiled up at him. "Henry, meet your son." Henry looked down at the baby's face, red and scrunched up and absolutely perfect, and felt his eyes fill with tears. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. I love you both so much." They named him James Henry Crawford, James for Arizona's father. Little James was a good baby, sleeping well and eating heartily. Arizona took to motherhood naturally, though she was often exhausted. Henry helped whenever he could, walking the floor with James when he was fussy at night, changing diapers, doing whatever was needed. Life with a baby was busy and chaotic, but it was also full of joy. They laughed at James's first smile, celebrated when he rolled over for the first time, marveled at every tiny milestone. The ranch continued to thrive as well. Henry hired a young ranch hand named Peter to help with some of the heavier work, which freed him up to spend more time with his growing family. When James was 2 years old, Arizona became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1886, she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Rose after Henry's mother. Rose had Arizona's auburn hair and Henry's brown eyes, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. With 2 young children, the house was never quiet. But Arizona would not have had it any other way. She loved watching Henry play with the children, loved the sound of their laughter echoing through the house. The ranch continued to grow as well, with Henry gradually expanding the herd and even bringing in some sheep as he had planned. One evening, when James was 4 and Rose was 2, the family was sitting on the front porch watching the sunset. James was playing with a wooden horse Henry had carved for him, and Rose was in Arizona's lap, fighting sleep. "You ever think about that night behind the restaurant?" Henry asked quietly. "The night we met," Arizona looked over at him and smiled. "All the time. It was the worst night of my life, but it was also the beginning of the best part of my life. If I had not been there, if you had not come along when you did, none of this would exist." "I like to think we would have found each other somehow," Henry said. "2 people like us, we were meant to be together." "Maybe, but I am glad it happened the way it did. Every struggle I went through, every hardship, it all led me here. To you, to this life, to our children. I would not change a single thing." Henry reached over and took her free hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I love you, Arizona Crawford. I love you too, Henry Crawford. The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and triumphs. There were hard winters and dry summers, times when money was tight and times when it flowed more freely. James and Rose grew into bright, capable children who learned to ride almost before they could walk. James was serious and thoughtful like his father, while Rose was adventurous and spirited like her mother. When James was 7 and Rose was 5, Arizona gave birth to another son whom they named Daniel. And 2 years after that, a fourth child arrived, another daughter they called Margaret. The house that had once seemed too big for just Henry now overflowed with life and love and noise. As the children grew, Arizona began teaching them to read and write, using the journal Henry had given her that first Christmas and other books they acquired over the years. She told them stories about her childhood in Missouri, about their grandparents they would never meet, about the journey that had brought her to Idaho and to their father. "You found Papa behind a restaurant?" Rose asked one day, confused. "No, darling. Papa found me. I was in a very difficult situation and he helped me when no one else would. He saved my life." "Were you a princess?" little Margaret asked. Arizona laughed. "No, sweetheart. I was just a young woman who had fallen on hard times. But your papa saw something in me worth saving, and he gave me a chance to prove myself. And I did, and we fell in love, and now we have all of you." "That is the best story ever," James declared. Henry, who had been listening from across the room, came over and wrapped his arms around Arizona from behind. "It is a pretty good story," he agreed. "And the best part is that it is true." As the years went on, the Crawford Ranch became known throughout the region as one of the best-run operations in Idaho. Henry's reputation as a fair and honest rancher grew, and Arizona became known for her hospitality and her skill at managing both a household and a working ranch. They took on additional help as the ranch expanded, but they never forgot where they came from or the struggles they had faced when anyone new came to work for them, especially if they were down on their luck. Henry and Arizona made sure to treat them with kindness and respect. They never forgot what it was like to be desperate and alone, to need help and have nowhere to turn. More than once, they gave second chances to people others had written off, and more often than not, those people proved their worth. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Henry took Arizona back to Malad City. They left the children with Henry's sister, who had come for a visit, and spent the day in town. Henry took her to Murphy's restaurant, where they had a leisurely meal and talked about everything that had happened since that fateful night. "You remember how terrified I was?" Arizona asked, smiling at the memory even though it had been anything but amusing at the time. "I thought the cook was going to have me arrested for loitering. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen," Henry said. "You were at the end of your rope, but you had not given up. You were still fighting, still trying to survive. That took courage." "I was just stubborn," Arizona said. "Same thing sometimes." Henry reached across the table and took her hand. "You have made me the happiest man alive, Arizona. These past 10 years with you have been the best of my life. I cannot wait to see what the next 10 bring." "More children, probably," Arizona said with a laugh. "And more cattle, more work, more chaos. Sounds perfect to me." After their meal, they walked through town, stopping in at various shops and visiting with people they knew. Arizona marveled at how much had changed since she first arrived in Malad City. She was no longer the desperate stranger begging for scraps. She was Mrs. Crawford, a respected member of the community, a successful rancher's wife, a mother of 4. But she never forgot that desperate girl she had been. Arizona made a point of helping others whenever she could. She donated food to families in need, took in women who needed work, and always had a kind word for strangers who looked lost or afraid. Henry supported her fully in these efforts, often saying that kindness costs nothing but means everything to those who receive it. As their children grew older, James began working more seriously on the ranch, learning everything he could from his father. He had a natural talent for working with cattle and horses, and Henry was proud to be training his successor. Rose, meanwhile, showed more interest in the business side of things, poring over the account books and asking questions about prices and markets. "She is going to be a force to be reckoned with," Arizona told Henry one evening as they watched Rose negotiating with Daniel over some perceived slight. "That girl could talk a snake out of its skin." "She gets that from you," Henry said, grinning. "From me? I am as meek as a lamb." Henry laughed outright at that. "Arizona, my love, you are many wonderful things, but meek is not one of them. You are stubborn, determined, and fierce when protecting what you love. Rose is just following in your footsteps." Arizona pretended to be offended, but she could not hide her smile. She knew Henry was right. She had learned to be strong out of necessity, but now that strength was simply part of who she was. As the children grew, the Crawford house became a hub of activity in the region. Arizona was known for her wonderful cooking, and Henry for his generosity, so it was not unusual for them to have extra people at their table for meals. Ranch hands, neighbors, traveling preachers, and sometimes complete strangers all found themselves welcomed into the Crawford home. "We have plenty to share," Arizona would always say. "No one leaves this table hungry if I have anything to say about it." It became something of a joke in the family that you never knew how many people would be at dinner until everyone sat down, but no one minded. The Crawford children grew up learning that hospitality was not just a duty but a privilege, and that helping others was simply the right thing to do. When James was 16, a young woman came to the ranch looking for work. Her name was Sarah Miller, and her story was eerily similar to Arizona's own. She had been traveling with her family when disease struck, killing both her parents and her younger brother. She had made it to Malad City, but had no money and nowhere to go. Arizona took one look at the girl and saw herself 15 years earlier. "You will stay with us," she said firmly. "We always have room for one more." Sarah proved to be a hard worker and a sweet girl. She helped Arizona with the household chores and looked after the younger children. But what Arizona had not anticipated was the way James looked at Sarah, or the way Sarah looked back at him. "They are falling in love," Henry observed one evening as they watched James and Sarah talking by the corral. "They are too young," Arizona protested, even though she knew it was not entirely true. She had been only 21 when she met Henry, and Sarah was 19 now. James was 16, but he was mature for his age, having grown up with responsibilities. "We will keep an eye on things," Henry said. "But if it is meant to be, trying to stop it will only make it stronger. You of all people should know that." Arizona sighed. She did know that, and she could see that what James and Sarah felt for each other was genuine. Over the following year, she watched their relationship develop, always there to offer guidance but never trying to interfere. When James turned 18, he approached his parents with a serious expression. "I would like your permission to marry Sarah," he said. "I love her and I want to spend my life with her. I will work hard to support her and I will be a good husband. I promise." Arizona looked at her son, no longer a boy but a man, and felt her eyes fill with tears. She looked at Henry, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "You have our blessing," Arizona said, "but you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you will always treat her with respect and kindness. Promise me you will be partners in everything, the way your father and I are. And promise me that if you ever see someone in need, you will help them the way we helped Sarah. the way your father helped me." "I promise," James said solemnly. James and Sarah were married in the spring of 1896, with the whole family in attendance. It was a joyful celebration, and Arizona could not help but remember her own simple wedding years earlier. So much had changed, but the most important things remained the same: love, family, and the commitment to building a life together. As the new century approached, the Crawford Ranch continued to thrive. James and Sarah built a small house on the property, not far from the main house, and began their own life together. Rose, now a striking young woman of 20, had started her own business buying and selling cattle, using her keen business sense and natural charm to make a name for herself. Daniel, at 16, was proving to be a talented horseman, training horses that were sought after throughout the region. And Margaret, the baby of the family at 14, was still deciding what her path would be. One evening in the summer of 1899, Henry and Arizona sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done countless times over the years. They were both in their early 40s now, their hair showing touches of gray, their faces lined from years of work and laughter and life. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Arizona asked, leaning her head on Henry's shoulder. "If you had not come along that night, if you had walked past me the way everyone else did." "All the time," Henry admitted. "I think about how close I came to losing you before I ever knew you. I almost did not go to Murphy's that night. I was tired and thinking about just heading back to the boarding house, but something told me to get a proper meal, and thank God I listened." "I think it was fate," Arizona said. "I think we were meant to find each other no matter what. I believe that too." Henry wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "You know what the best part is? After all these years, I love you even more than I did the day we married. I did not think that was possible, but it is true." "I feel the same way," Arizona said softly. "You are my best friend, my partner, the love of my life. Everything good in my life started the night you found me behind that restaurant." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. From inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their family: Margaret practicing piano, Daniel telling some story that had Rose laughing, the distant cry of James and Sarah's new baby. "We did well, did we not?" Henry said. "Built something good here." "We did," Arizona agreed. "We built a home, a family, a legacy. And it all started because you saw someone in need and decided to help. That one act of kindness changed everything, for both of us." As they sat there together, surrounded by everything they had built, Arizona felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She thought about the frightened, desperate young woman she had been, begging for scraps behind a restaurant in a strange town. She thought about Henry, the kind cowboy who had seen her worth when no one else did. She thought about all the years in between, the struggles and triumphs, the joy and sorrow, the ordinary moments that had woven together to create an extraordinary life. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For everything. For saving me, for believing in me, for loving me, for giving me this life, this family, for being exactly who you are." Henry turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the last light of the sun. "I should be thanking you. You made me whole, Arizona. Before you, I was just existing, but you taught me how to truly live." They kissed, a gentle kiss full of love and promise and the comfortable intimacy of two people who had spent years learning each other's hearts. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Inside the house, Margaret called out that dinner was ready. Henry stood and offered Arizona his hand, just as he had done countless times over the years. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet, and together they walked into the warm, lamp-lit house where their family waited. The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. The Crawford Ranch remained in the family, passed down through generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. Henry and Arizona grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced challenges and celebrated triumphs, always side by side, always partners in every sense of the word. When Henry was in his early 60s, his health began to fail. Arizona nursed him through pneumonia one winter, refusing to leave his side. He recovered, but both of them knew that their time was growing shorter. They made the most of every day, taking walks around the ranch they had built together, spending time with their children and grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the home they had shared for over 30 years, Henry took Arizona's hand. "I've had a good life," he said. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "Do not talk like that," Arizona said, though she knew what he was getting at. "You have plenty of years left in you yet. Maybe, maybe not. But either way, I want you to know that loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. You took a chance on a rough cowboy and you made him into a better man. You built this ranch as much as I did, raised our children, created a home full of love. I could not have asked for a better partner or a better wife." Arizona felt tears streaming down her face. "You saved my life, Henry Crawford. In every way a person can be saved. I was lost and you found me. I was broken and you made me whole. Everything I am, everything we built, it is because of you." "It is because of us," Henry corrected gently. "We did this together. That has always been our strength. We are a team, you and me." They held each other close, the fire crackling softly beside them, and Arizona sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for every moment they had shared. Henry lived for another 10 years, making it to see his 75th birthday before passing peacefully in his sleep one autumn night. Arizona was devastated by his loss, but she was also grateful for the long, full life they had shared. She continued to live on the ranch, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, always telling stories about the cowboy who had changed her life. "He was the best man I ever knew," she would say. "Kind, generous, hardworking, and so full of love. He taught me that one act of kindness can change a life, and that true partnership means facing everything together." Arizona lived to be 82 years old, sharp and active until the very end. When she passed away one spring morning, surrounded by family, her last words were, "Tell Henry I am coming home." She was buried beside Henry on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The stone marker read, "Arizona Crawford, beloved wife, mother, and friend." She turned scraps into a feast and built a legacy of love. And so ended the story of the young woman who begged for scraps behind a restaurant and the cowboy who took her inside and made her his partner. But in another sense, the story never really ended at all. It lived on in the ranch that still bore the Crawford name, in the descendants who carried their blood and their values, and in the countless people whose lives were touched by their kindness and generosity. The Crawford Ranch remained a place where strangers were welcomed, and those in need found help, a testament to the belief that one act of kindness can echo through generations. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun painted the Idaho sky in shades of gold and rose, people swore they could see two figures sitting on the porch of the old house, holding hands and watching the sunset together, their love as enduring as the land itself. The legacy of Henry and Arizona Crawford was not measured in acres or cattle or money, though they had been successful by those standards as well. Their true legacy was measured in love, the love they had for each other, for their family, for the land they worked, and for the strangers they helped along the way. They had proven that kindness and compassion were not weaknesses but strengths, and that a life built on partnership and mutual respect could weather any storm. Their story became something of a legend in Malad City and the surrounding areas. Parents told it to their children as an example of what was possible when people looked beyond circumstances to see the potential in others. Young couples cited them as a model for marriage. And anyone who fell on hard times took comfort in knowing that Arizona Crawford had once been in their shoes, and she had not only survived but thrived. The restaurant where they first met, Murphy's, eventually closed down, but the building remained. Years later, Arizona's great-granddaughter bought the property and turned it into a community center where people could come for meals if they were hungry, for shelter if they needed it, and for help finding work. Above the door, she hung a sign that read, "In memory of Arizona and Henry Crawford, who proved that kindness changes everything." And so the story came full circle. The place where Arizona had once begged for scraps became a beacon of hope for others in need, a living monument to the belief that everyone deserves a chance and that help given freely can transform lives. It was exactly what Arizona would have wanted, and exactly what Henry would have supported. The Crawford children and grandchildren continued to uphold the values they had learned. James and Sarah had 5 children of their own, all of whom grew up hearing stories about their grandmother's difficult early days and their grandfather's generous heart. Rose built her cattle business into one of the most successful in Idaho, but she never forgot to help young women who wanted to enter the business world. Daniel's horses were sought after across the western states, and he always made time to teach young people about horsemanship. And Margaret became a teacher, dedicating her life to educating children and making sure no child fell through the cracks because of poverty or circumstance. Each of them, in their own way, honored the memory of Henry and Arizona. They told the story again and again, making sure it was never forgotten. And they lived by the principles their parents had embodied. Work hard, treat people with respect, help those in need, and never underestimate the power of kindness. As the 20th century progressed, and the world changed in ways Henry and Arizona could never have imagined, the Crawford Ranch adapted but never lost its essential character. It remained a working ranch, but it also became a place where people came to learn about the history of the region, about ranching traditions, and about the inspiring story of its founders. Visitors walked through the old house, now preserved as it had been in Henry and Arizona's day, and marveled at the simple, hardscrabble life they had led. They saw the wooden table where the family had gathered for meals, the rocking chair where Arizona had nursed her babies, the desk where Henry had kept his account books. They saw the bedroom where 4 children had been born, and where, years later, Henry had drawn his last breath with Arizona holding his hand. But more than the physical artifacts, people took away the story itself. They learned about the desperate young woman and the compassionate cowboy, about the partnership they built, and the love that sustained them through decades of hard work and challenges. They learned that the American West was not just about gunfights and gold rushes, but also about ordinary people building extraordinary lives through determination, cooperation, and love. The story of Henry and Arizona Crawford became woven into the fabric of Idaho history, a reminder that the true pioneers were not just those who claimed land or struck it rich, but those who built communities based on mutual support and human decency. Schools taught about them, historians wrote about them, and generations of children grew up knowing their names. But perhaps the most fitting tribute to their memory was the way their story continued to inspire people to act with kindness. Over the years, Countless people said that hearing about Henry and Arizona had motivated them to help someone in need, to give a stranger a second chance, to look beyond surface circumstances, to see a person's true worth. In this way, their legacy multiplied and spread far beyond the ranch in Idaho, touching lives across the country and across generations. As the 21st century dawned, the Crawford Ranch celebrated its 120th anniversary. Descendants came from all over the country for a massive reunion. There were now hundreds of people who could trace their lineage back to Henry and Arizona, and they gathered on the land their ancestors had claimed and worked and loved. During the celebration, the eldest living descendant, a great-great-granddaughter named Alice, who was 93 years old, told the story one more time. She had heard it from her grandmother, who had heard it directly from Arizona herself. As she spoke, describing the young woman begging for scraps and the cowboy who could not walk past someone in need, there was not a dry eye in the crowd. They were ordinary people, Alice concluded, who did extraordinary things through the simple power of kindness and love. They faced hardships, yes, but they faced them together. They built not just a ranch but a legacy, and that legacy is us. Everyone here today exists because Henry Crawford decided to help a stranger, and because Arizona Jenkins had the courage to accept that help and make the most of her second chance. Let us honor them by living the way they did, with open hearts, open hands, and an unwavering commitment to treating every person with dignity and respect. The crowd erupted in applause, and as the celebration continued into the evening, people shared their own stories of kindness given and received, of second chances that had changed their lives, of partnerships that had sustained them through hard times. The spirit of Henry and Arizona lived on in each of these stories, proof that their love and their values had indeed created a legacy that would endure. As night fell over the Crawford Ranch that day, the same stars that had shone down on Henry and Arizona all those years ago blazed bright in the clear Idaho sky. The land they had worked remained beautiful and productive. The house they had built still stood strong, and the family they had created continued to thrive. It was a testament to the enduring power of love, the importance of partnership, and the transformative potential of kindness. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go when their earthly journey ends, Henry and Arizona Crawford looked down on all of it and smiled, knowing that the story that began behind a restaurant in 1882 would continue to inspire and uplift for generations to come. Their love had not just survived, but had flourished, growing and spreading like the roots of the ancient trees that dotted their ranch, reaching ever deeper and wider, providing strength and sustenance to all who came after. The story of the cowboy and the woman begging for scraps had become a legend, but more than that, it had become a truth that people held on to in difficult times. That one moment of compassion can change everything. That partnership built on mutual respect can overcome any obstacle, and that love, true love, never really ends. It simply transforms, becoming part of the very fabric of the world, influencing lives in ways both seen and unseen, forever and always.